Hello again, wrestling fans. Often voted everyone's favorite Royal Rumble. With a tear in my eye. Here we go. January 27, 1992 Wrestling Observer Newsletter. FLAIR wins Royal Rumble. More awards. WCW Courts Brett. By Observer staff. Joel Goodhart, the controversial Philadelphia wrestling promoter whose Tri-State Wrestling Association had gained a cult following, announced Saturday on his radio show that because he's out of money, he's done in the wrestling business. Besides the TWA, which promoted quarterly bloodbaths in Philadelphia's Pennsylvania Hall that were probably the most talked about and well-attended independent shows in the country, with 2 shows drawing better than $30,000 houses, along with independents in the Delaware Valley area that weren't nearly as well-attended. That also means the end of Goodhart's radio show on WHIP in Philadelphia, his Squared Circle fan club which had luncheons with many of the top-name wrestlers, and his Ring Masters Wrestling School in Philadelphia. Goodhart had talked of late of expanding his TWA, with his first television tapings being scheduled for later this month, and not too long ago he was talking about promoting 125 shows in 1992, including 5 shows per month in the state of Florida. Goodhart's bankruptcy announcement came just 1 week before a scheduled big show in Philadelphia, which insiders had known was falling apart. In recent weeks, Goodhart's deal with Joe Daigo, which had him get 1 New Japan match on each of his big shows, fell apart because Daigo was tired of Goodhart not returning his calls. In addition, the Buddy Rogers vs. Buddy Landel match had fallen apart even before Goodhart's announcement. Rogers had decided to pull out of the show because Goodhart never returned phone calls and was going to make the announcement publicly over the weekend. The other headline match, Dan Crawford and Doug Furnas vs. Steve Williams and Terry Gordy, was also exceedingly doubtful because, you got it, none of the 4 had any phone calls returned. Goodhart's shows were the favorite of some hardcores, with FMW like bloodbaths up and down the show and brawling all over the building, the most memorable probably being the series of matches between Eddie Gilbert and Cactus Jack in 1991. The Gilbert-Jack series finished 3rd in the Wrestling Observer Feud of the Year balloting. See page 2, a somewhat incredible accomplishment for a group without television. However, unlike Memphis, which occasionally promoted matches of that type, and FMW in Japan, which does on a nightly basis but limits the craziness to the main event or the top 2 matches on the show, as to not burn the audience out early, Goodhart would have matches like that from the bottom to the top of major shows that generally exceeded 3 hours in duration. The common complaint was that he burned the audience out with the blood and brawling in the stands, and by the time the main event came on, the audience had nothing left and the main eventers had nothing left to show the crowd that they hadn't seen. While those shows made some feel they were the best shows in North America, others felt they couldn't sustain themselves working in that matter over the long run with the overuse of blood and would eventually spell the group's demise. While this probably had little to do with the success or failure of the promotion, Goodhart's bombastic radio and in-person personality also rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. In truth, Goodhart's fatal mistake was simply he put together an operation that needed consistent money to sustain itself and wasn't able to generate that kind of money. Even on his biggest houses, there is question whether or not the shows were even profitable, since he paid so many big guarantees to load up the shows and had large expenses for flying so many wrestlers in. The independent promoters who have been able to survive these times, where it's difficult to draw to live shows because of so much free television wrestling, and WWF, and to a lesser extent WCW, with the notoriety of having all the big names, making everything else seem Bush League in comparison, generally have brought in 1 or maybe 2 matches with recognizable name talent to draw some fans and filled out the shows with local wrestlers who work cheap and have no transportation expenses associated with them. In that way, the top match, or top 2 matches, will hopefully bring some fans in, while expenses are kept down. In flying in an entire crew and paying big money for several matches deep on the show, you are still only going to draw basically the same crowd that is willing to attend non-Major League Wrestling, but your expenses have gone through the roof. There were many who questioned all along whether or not there were enough hardcore blood and guts freaks to support a promotion with that philosophy over the long haul, because a promotion like that turns off a great percentage of potential fans. But to his defense, a group that a casual fan sees as Bush League needs to find a niche, rather than just deliver straight live wrestling, which in and of itself is going through tough economic times because of so much free on television. I don't believe Goodhart's demise would be fair to blame on the failure of that style of wrestling, although that style by its very excesses is going to only have a limited audience, as much as an inability for non-WWF wrestling in this country to draw big enough money live to support flying and star-studded lineups. In addition to his expenses of running live shows, Goodhart also had to pay for his weekly slot on WIP radio, $800 per week. Just a few weeks back, the show didn't air with rumors going around that he was running low on money, although Goodhart was back on a week later and claimed the show was off because he had the flu. Goodhart has left behind a lot of customers who had already purchased 1992 season tickets for his quarterly big shows, and there was reportedly a sizable advance for this coming weekend's shows. Since Goodhart himself handled the tickets and hasn't returned any calls, and rumor has it he'll be disconnecting his phone early this week, there is no word on what a procedure would be for refunds, or if he declares bankruptcy, whether he'll be even able to get refunds. Ric Flair became the first man ever to actually win both the WWF and NWA World titles on Sunday, January 19, to highlight the Royal Rumble pay-per-view show from Albany, New York. The show, which drew a legit full house of 17,000 fans, was designed to be and turned out to be Flair's one-man performance, coming into the Rumble at the 2-minute mark and being there until the end came 1 hour and 2 seconds later. The only other development out of the show was the beginning of the Sid Justice heel turn on Hulk Hogan at the end of the Rumble. Ironically, while this didn't come across as strong on television, Liv said that Justice received a total babyface reaction for turning on Hogan, and Hogan was heavily booed at the end of the show. Without the announcers giving one the impression that it was Justice who turned, those in the building saw it as Justice throwing Hogan out, which some would have thought would have been enough to turn one heel considering Hogan's strong babyface persona, but wasn't Liv, which was legal in an every man for himself match. But then Hogan, who had been eliminated, teaming with Flair, a heel, to dump Justice, the last remaining babyface in the ring, and allow Flair, a heel, to win the WWF title. This sets up an apparent Flair vs. Hogan main event at WrestleMania on April 5 in Indianapolis. With Hogan still scheduled to take off from Mania until SummerSlam, it doesn't seem to make sense that he'll win the title on that show, but of course, they haven't put off a leg drop finish for this long for no reason. Doing the angle with Justice also makes it clear that there are no plans that Hogan is going to bid farewell to this business, because they've already started building Hogan vs. Justice for either SummerSlam, or maybe they'll even stall it out until the 1993 WrestleMania. It should be noted that 1 week ago, the WWF shipped posters to Japan for WrestleMania which listed Flair as champion defending against Hogan as the top match. And speaking of kayfabe, one of the stranger stories of the past week involves the Intercontinental title. Officially, as the storyline goes, Bret Hart went to the ring with a 104-degree fever on Friday night, January 17, in Springfield, Massachusetts, and lost the title to the Mountie. Mountie in turn dropped the title at the Rumble 2 days later to Roddy Piper. As has become pretty common knowledge as the week went on, Hart had negotiated and at one point agreed to a deal where he would debut on Tuesday, January 21, at the Clash of the Champions for WCW in Topeka, where he'd come out with the Intercontinental title as something of payback for the WWF bringing in Ric Flair and having him wear what WCW considered their world title belt. Of course, the situations are completely different in that Flair was fired by WCW after the company attempted to cut an existing contract almost in half, which somehow 6 months later WCW feels is the WWF's fault for, to the extent they went to court over getting the belt off WWF television shows. So this idea was to gain revenge on the WWF. But the difference is that Hart would be walking out on a valid contract. The fact Hart was losing the title in Springfield was the world's worst kept secret, being that the WWF syndicated shows went out on the satellite Wednesday, which means anyone with a dish, which probably means well over 1 million potential viewers, would have been able to watch on Wednesday them talk about, in the past tense, in detail, an angle that was going to occur 2 days later. It should be noted that the decision made to change the Intercontinental title from Hart to Piper was made weeks ago, before any talks had even started with WCW. So despite rumors to the contrary that are sure to spread, it wasn't a last-minute decision made by Titan to get the belt off Hart for fear he was leaving. If anything, Hart knowing he was going to lose the title may have been an impetus in his exploring the option of a jump. Apparently WCW offered Hart a guaranteed deal that was substantially more than he had been earning as Intercontinental champ. However, after apparently agreeing to the deal, Hart had to back off because he realized his contract with the WWF, which he thought had run out, had rolled over and he couldn't give notice for several more months. However, WCW sources indicate that Hart, who had backed out of the deal as of a few days ago, will be coming in after all in not too many months. Hart was promised that after losing the strap to Mountie at a house show that he would be getting it back at WrestleMania, even if it meant in a babyface match against Piper. In this case, and since word got out on several Wrestling 900 numbers over the weekend, which said that Hart would be starting at the Clash on Tuesday, and I'm sure many people, with Hart not appearing at the Rumble, which was to sell the illness and allow Piper to get the match and then the strap, believe that confirmed the reports he was jumping, the plan WCW was attempting. Hart probably isn't in exactly the most favorable political position in the WWF right now as a possible lame duck. As far as similar rumors involving Curt Hennig, first off, he's still months away from returning to the ring to begin with. Second, he just signed a new contract as an announcer with the WWF from what I'm told. Although he is longtime friends with Rick Rude, they both grew up together in Robbinsdale, Minnesota, and nearly everyone in wrestling is envious of Rude's contract with WCW, rumored to be $300,000 for working 142 dates. As most of you will know by the time you are reading this, WCW did debut Jesse Ventura as its surprise announcement at the Clash that takes place the Tuesday before most of you read this. Ventura signed a limited deal with WCW to appear at the Clash, do promos and in cable company infomercial for the Super Brawl pay-per-view, and do the announcing along with Jim Ross and Tony Schiavone at the February 29 Super Brawl show from Milwaukee. Ventura's deal was, according to WCW sources, the most lucrative single event announcing deal in the history of pro wrestling. The deal also includes additional bonuses for Ventura based on the buy rate of the show, although if I'm correct, the bonuses don't kick in unless the show does a 2.0% buy rate, which is well out of the range of possibility. While hiring Ventura, who developed a huge cult following as a commentator with the WWF and is generally regarded as the person who popularized the role of heel wrestler doing commentary, does add credibility to an organization that is seemingly on a small rebound, there is a downside as well. By signing Ventura to a deal of this magnitude, they've established his per-event price. If he does just Super Brawl, WCW has gained nothing by using him other than he'll probably make a pay-per-view show, which probably would have been a great show to begin with, a little more entertaining, although the 3 men in the booth is one too many and there's a chance of it not gelling perfectly. Ironically, while some WWF officials were trying to spread word that Ventura signed with WCW because he had run out of money, it was coincidental because Ventura was featured this past weekend on the television show Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. Ventura laughed at the insinuation, pointing out he's got a regular gig as co-host of the syndicated grudge match show and said, "If I was broke, which I'm not, I wouldn't be now," referring to his new deal. Speaking of Super Brawl, the top 6 matches on the show will be Lex Luger vs. Sting for the WCW Championship, Rick Rude vs. Ricky Steamboat for the US title, Arnold Anderson and Bobby Eaton, who won the titles November 16 in Jacksonville from Steamboat, and Dustin Rhodes vs. Rick and Scott Steiner for the WCW Tag Team title, Jushin Liger vs. Brian Pillman for the WCW Light Heavyweight title. Expect Liger to be back as IWGP Junior Heavyweight Champion before this match takes place as well. Dustin Rhodes and Barry Windham vs. Steve Austin and Larry Zbyszko in some kind of a gimmick match like a cage match or bull rope match, probably a cage because you know Dusty could never go 2 pay-per-view shows in a row without doing a cage. And Big Josh and Ron Simmons defend the U.S. Tag Team titles that they won from the Young Pistols on November 14 in Columbus, Georgia, against Mr. Hughes and Big Van Vader managed by Harley Race. There are a few underneath matches tentative. I'm not sure what they all are, although I'm told none of them are good. But 2 of them are Johnny B. Bad vs. Cactus Jack and Marcus Alexander Bagwell vs. Taylor Made Man, Terry Taylor. This year's Royal Rumble was certainly one of the WWF's best pay-per-view shows ever. I gave it a thumbs up without any question. The undercard was a slight thumbs down, but the Rumble itself was more than enough to change that. I thought as an overall show, last year's Rumble from a wrestling content and excitement perspective was significantly better. I still rank last year's Rumble as the best WWF pay-per-view show in recent years. However, last year's show with them exploiting the war so heavy-handedly left a bad aftertaste. This year's Rumble match itself was a lot better than last year's Rumble match, which didn't match the strong undercard and was somewhat anticlimactic. Last year's show had the opener with the Orient Express vs. Rockers that was, in my opinion, the best WWF match I've seen since Steamboat Savage in 1987, plus a strong Warrior vs. Slaughter match, because of Randy Savage and Sensational Sherry more than Warrior or Slaughter. But it seems the majority opinion for messages thus far is that this was the best WWF pay-per-view show at least since last year's Rumble.
In the dark match, Chris Walker beat Brooklyn Brawler via DQ.
Brawler got the pin with his feet on the ropes, however Jack Tunney came out and overruled the ref and reversed the decision. This was done to turn Tunney babyface for the live crowd so they wouldn't boo him when he came out for his announcement before the Royal Rumble. It didn't work since they booed Tunney like crazy when he came out later in the show. Dud. 1. The New Foundation, Owen Hart and Jim Neidhart, beat the Orient Express, Pat Tanaka and Tom Kato Boric aka Paul Diamond, in 17-18. Hart, who with the exception of Ric Flair and maybe Shawn Michaels, was the best performer on the show, made this match along with Tanaka taking his fastest bumps in wrestling. First half of the match saw the Foundation dominate with Neidhart getting over through Tanaka's big selling and Hart doing the acrobatic moves. The heat spot started when Mr. Fuji hit Hart with his cane. At one point Fuji put his cane by the turnbuckles and Hart was whipped into the buckles and broke the cane with his shoulder, and they got a near fall but Hart got his foot over the rope. The ref missed some tags to Neidhart while they kept the heat on Hart. Hart finally did a double dropkick to both Orients and made the hot tag at 16:30, and they went to the finish. Neidhart body blocked Kato out of the ring. Hart did a lucha libre dive through the ropes onto Kato, then climbed back in the ring and pinned Tanaka with the rocket launcher. 3¼ stars. 2. Roddy Piper beat the Mountie to win the Intercontinental title with the sleeper in 5:18. Love Mountie's entrance music. Nothing wrong with the match, but nothing much happened either. After the match, Jimmy Hart tried to zap Piper, but Piper got the zapper and zapped Mountie. 1¾ stars. 3. Beverly Brothers beat Bushwhackers after an interminable 15:26 when Bo Beverly, Wayne Bloom, came off the ropes with a double sledge on Butch Miller behind the ref's back, and Blake Beverly got the pin. This match was so long and so bad it would give most shows a thumbs down all by itself. And that's not even considering Jameson. The only thing bearable was the commentary, since they never talked about the match and just concentrated on comedy, with Heenan ranking on Jameson. But after the commentary, the best thing about the match was all the missed moves. The next best thing was the Bushwhackers licking each other and marching around the ring. Predictably, after the match was over, the Bushwhackers chased the Beverlys from the ring and held the Genius so Jameson could kick him in the shin and the butt. Earlier in the match, Genius had slapped Jameson. At least Jameson plays his ultra nerd role well. And to Titan's credit, their non-humorous attempt at comedy with Jameson at least was put in a match where it couldn't make it much worse. -1½ star. 4. Natural Disasters beat Legion of Doom via countout, so Doom keeps the WWF Tag Team titles in 9:27. This was actually the best match I've seen these four have. But says more about how bad the other matches have been. But it was okay until the cheap finish where everyone was brawling on the floor and Typhoon got in to beat the count. With all the time they spent on booking the rest of the card, they must have spent the time it takes between bites of a roast beef sandwich to come up with this finish. 1½ star. 5. The Royal Rumble opened with Jack the Best President since Noriega Tunney making an introduction like he was Lord Blears, and this was Japan. The Rumble opened with the British Bulldog, who is a living and somewhat moving monument to what the WWF's real steroid policy is, and Ted DiBiase. They went at it for a hot 1:19 before DiBiase was clotheslined over. Bulldog got 30 seconds reprieve before Ric Flair drew number 3, and Ric took his time, 47 seconds, before he even got in the ring. They had about 2 minutes of hot action, with the highlight being Bulldog pressing Flair 5 times overhead before Jerry Saggs came in. He was out almost as quick, at 5:25 when Bulldog dropkicked him off the apron. Next in was Haku, sub for Marty Jannetty, from the SWS in Japan. Then came Shawn Michaels, as they were loaded up the workers early. The 3 best workers in the promotion, DiBiase, came in first, Flair came in right after, and Michaels came in at 6 minutes. Tito Santana, the Barbarian, Kerry Von Erich, Repo Man and Greg Valentine all came in, most of whom went right after Flair and worked spots with him, which seemingly was everyone's role when they came in. Somewhere along with way, Haku went out. Nikolai Volkov was next up, late sub for Brian Knobbs, who was still out of action because of his stab wounds in Peoria, but he lasted about 90 seconds before Barbarian tossed him over at 21:27. Big Boss Man sprinted in next and worked some hot spots with, guess who? Then came the mini Titanic, everyone jumping overboard at once, with Repo Man dumping Valentine at 22:30, Boss Man dumping Repo Man at 22:59, Flair dumping Bulldog at 23:36 and Von Erich going over at 23:48, followed by Santana and Michaels going out together in 23:58. Hercules came in, then Barbarian went out at 25:24 and Flair reversed a move by Hercules and Hercules went out at 25:36. This left Flair to work a quick spot with Bossman, which ended with Flair ducking and Bossman going over the top rope at 25:54. Roddy Piper came in for 2 minutes along with Flair, ending with Piper catching Flair in the sleeper and having him just about out until Jake Roberts came in, first not breaking the move until Flair was out, then attacking both Piper and Flair. The ring then reloaded with Jim Duggan, IRS, Jimmy Snuka and The Undertaker, all of whom went right to Flair. Undertaker dumped Snuka in 37:13. Randy Savage was next up and dumped Roberts in 39:30 and jumped over the top rope after Savage, which the announcers called as an elimination but later corrected themselves. For years, it used to be a regular cheapo battle royal finish where some egomaniac like Dusty, Inoki or a guy like Andre would jump over the top and eliminate himself while chasing a heated rival so that nobody would toss them out, saying you have to be propelled out. The Berserker, Virgil and Colonel Mustafa came in next to add quality to the ring. By this point Monsoon must have seen Rick Martel's name next on the sheet because in the brawling between Piper and Flair he kept calling Flair Rick Martel. Martel was in next and Mustafa went out at 48:50. Hogan came in, which meant it was time to dump just about everyone. Hulk clotheslined Undertaker over at 50:58, backdropped Berserker out at 51:06 and Virgil and Duggan got tangled up together and went out at 51:27. Skinner and Sergeant Slaughter were the next two in. Martel dumped Skinner in 54:25. Then rounding out the field came Sid Justice and the Warlord. At 58:55, Justice dumped Slaughter. At 59:50, Piper reversed a whip by IRS and dumped him. Justice and Hogan combined to dump Warlord at 60:15. Justice then dumped Piper and Martel together at 60:39, so Piper went 34 minutes. Savage went out at 61:03, leaving Hogan, Justice, and Flair. Justice quickly dumped Hogan from behind in 61:35. Then as Hogan and Justice argued, Hogan grabbed Justice's hand from outside the ring and pulled while Flair pushed from the inside and Justice went out at 62:02, leaving Flair as the winner. As battle royals go, this was overall one of the better ones I've ever seen because there were several storylines to stay interested in instead of it just being mumbo-jumbo brawling without any purpose. They also couldn't have put Flair over any bigger as a worthy champion. 3 3/4 stars. As the first major pay-per-view show well after anabolic steroid testing has been supposedly implemented, there were a few things to note. First, use appeared to have increased since Survivors and Tuesday in Texas. It appeared from here that about half the guys were in the middle of some kind of a cycle and maybe 18% appeared to have been off, at least for a while. The remaining 31% either wear costuming that makes it impossible to tell, IRS, Big Boss Man, etc., or may have been on or off but one can't tell for sure. Anyway, with use so high at this point, 10 weeks after the supposed unbeatable testing has been implemented and with more than enough time to cycle down from mid-November, let alone from late July, this tells us that one or more of these things is the case. 1 star. Some or many aspects of this whole thing were a farce to begin with, and steroid testing is something of a hoax in sports like track and bodybuilding and unbeatable in football by those with knowledge of how to, simply to work the public and the media. 1 star. McMahon was serious about a policy but enough guys banded together citing their constitutional rights to use felonious drugs at will and McMahon doesn't have the, whatever word you want to fill in the blank with, although McMahon himself used the word guts, although I call it just a realistic corporate decision given all the circumstances, to suspend more than 20 wrestlers at once. 1 star. McMahon is serious, the policy does work, and he simply didn't want to ruin his pay-per-view, so we'll be seeing 20 or more suspensions shortly. No way in the world this is happening because it would confirm everything that's been written about from day one, not to mention the chaos it would put the house show business in. Whatever it is at this point, barring something major happening in the next week or two, we can pretty safely write this whole steroid testing story from mid-July on as something that was either a fraud to begin with, or turned into one somewhere along the way. If you think that's unique to Vince McMahon, you should read about track and field or drug testing in the Olympics. Pointing out that other organizations have also been deceptive isn't meant to justify the Titan position. Terry Funk debuted this past Friday with a small regular role in the new TV series Tequila and Bonetti on CBS television. The show, which opened to generally poor reviews, is about an Italian New York police officer who is now working out of Los Angeles whose partners are a woman and a jive-talking dog. Funk plays one of the officers in the precinct who is usually soft-spoken and mild-mannered, but his voice explodes in a huge contrast every now and then. Feud of the Year. 1. Surita and CO. versus Misawa and CO, 154, 1021. 2. Ric Flair versus Hulk Hogan, 120-905. 3. Eddie Gilbert versus Cactus Jack, 109-784. 4. Asia Kong vs. Bull Nakano 27, 306. 5. Randy Savage vs. Jake Roberts, 33, 276. Honorable mention: Ultimate Warrior vs. The Undertaker 229, Sting vs. Cactus Jack 217, Ric Flair vs. Roddy Piper 175, Ultimate Warrior vs. Randy Savage 92, Mitsuharu Misawa and Toshiaki Kawada vs. Terry Gordy and Steve Williams 96, Atsushi Onita vs. Mr. Pogo 85, Steiners vs. Hiroshi Hazi and Kensuke Sasaki 80. Previous winners: 1980, Bruno Sammartino vs. Larry Zbyszko. 1981, Andre the Giant vs. Killer Khan. 1982, Ted DiBiase vs. Junkyard Dog. 1983, Freebirds vs. Von Erichs. 1984, Freebirds vs. Von Erichs. 1985, Ted DiBiase vs. Jim Duggan. 1986, Hulk Hogan vs. Paul Orndorff. 1987, Jerry Lawler vs. Tommy Rich and Austin Idol. 1988, Midnight Express vs. The Fantastics. 1989, Ric Flair vs. Terry Funk. 1990, Jumbo Tsuruta vs. Mitsuharu Misawa. John Muse Tsurda's team versus Misawa's team gets my vote hands down. You'd think that a feud that started in May of 1990 would have died down a little bit by now, but this feud is the exception. They have super matches night after night and play before sellout crowds. What more can you ask for from a feud? Steve Yohei, Ric Flair vs. Hulk Hogan was disappointing in the ring but impossible not to list first. It seemed really important when it started. Steve Gerber, Tsurda vs. Misawa in singles or tag team matches, these two beat on each other for the entire year. It's hard to imagine the endurance required for these 20 to 30 minute epics they put together every night, particularly when you consider that most of them were in the 4-star range. Joe ECKL, Ultimate Warrior vs. Undertaker. They say hardcore angles are the sign of a desperate promotion. Regardless, Warrior vs. Undertaker was consistently interesting and drew better than anything else at the houses this year. Andy Stowell, the major focus of All Japan this year was the battles between Jumbo Tsuruta and Mitsuharu Misawa. Most fans know it's just a matter of time before the torch gets passed, and every time Tsuruta wrestles, they're waiting for that moment. The most shocking in-ring moment of the year came when Tsuruta submitted to Misawa in September. Teresa DiMarie, while Hogan vs. Flair has been disappointing at the gate, is the only drawing feud in wrestling right now. Overall, the matches have been good by Hogan's standards, and it certainly isn't because of Hogan. Evan Schlesinger, one of the matches with Asia Kong and Bison Kimura vs. Bull Nakano and Kyoko Inoue would be legendary if every single match between the four wasn't so great. So the problem was that no specific match stood out. Still, they were brutal matches, and it was the best feud of the year. Frank Strom, was there any fan not pumped up by the Flair vs. Hogan feud? This is the sort of excitement that the WWF has seemed incapable of generating for all these years. Michael McGowan, whether in tag teams or in singles, Misawa and Company vs. Tsuruta and Company has provided the most consistently good to excellent series in any promotion this year, and it shows no sign of dying down. Gabriel Daigle, Misawa and Kawada vs. Gordy and Williams had some of the best matches of the year. There's always great heat from these four. Tag Team of the Year. 1. Mitsuharu Misawa and Toshiaki Kawada, 187, 1287. 2. Rick and Scott Steiner, 126, 1160. 3. Hiroshi Hazi and Kensuke Sasaki, 73, 916. 4. Steve Williams and Terry Gordy, 59, 763. 5. Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty, 42, 557. Honorable mention Arnold Anderson and Larry Zbyszko, 437, Legion of Doom 373, Asia Kong and Bison Kimura 283, Nasty Boys 194, Keiji Muto and Hiroshi Hazi 179, Dan Crawford and Doug Furness 97, Bull Nakano and Akira Hokuto 83. Previous winners: 1980 Terry Gordy and Buddy Roberts, 1981 Terry Gordy and Jimmy Snuka, 1982 Stan Hansen and Ole Anderson, 1983 Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood, 1984 Road Warriors, 1985 Dynamite Kid and Davey Boy Smith, 1986 Bobby Eaton and Dennis Condrey, 1987 Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane, 1988 Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane, 1989 Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty, 1990 Rick and Scott Steiner. Chris Zavisa, Mitsuharu Misawa and Toshiaki Kawada were probably involved in half of the year's best 50 matches. Todd Stutz, Asia Kong and Bison Kimura are totally brutal on their opponents and complement each other very well. John Stevenson, with the Steiners injured, it's hard to pick them as number one. Rockers had another year of carrying lugs to good to very good matches. Tom Wisman, Hiroshi Hazi and Kensuke Sasaki are incredibly solid. They complemented each other perfectly. Paul Hanlon, the Steiners had the most great matches of any team in the world. It didn't matter that they didn't team up for several months. Mike Omonski, the Rockers are consistently high-energy performers with some very hot pay-per-view matches this past year. Jeff Cohen, when the Steiners are on, nobody can touch them. Mitch Nakagawa, Mitsuharu Misawa and Toshiaki Kawada are the best. They don't need to be on a pay-per-view show to have a great match. They have them every night. Mystery Eye, although they only wrestled as a team for half the year, the Steiners deserve it because they had 3 Match of the Year candidates in a period of 4 months. Steve Sims, the crowd reactions whenever Misawa and Kawada wrestle Gordy and Williams are fantastic. They drew fans who cared about the results as well as the action. Great work throughout the feud, and they made Gordy and Williams look good enough to be Tag Team of the Year. Most improved. 1. Dustin Rhodes, 78,
692.
2. Steve Austin, 71, 665. 3. Cactus Jack, 75, 618. 4. Billy Black, 73, 445. 5. Kyoko Inoue, 47, 367. Honorable mention, Johnny B. Bad, 318, Scott Norton, 300, Masao Orihara, 255, Kena Kobashi, 253, Tsuyoshi Kikuchi, 216, Virgil, 89. Previous winners: 1980, Larry Zbyszko. 1981, Adrian Adonis. 1982, Jim Duggan. 1983, Kurt Hennig. 1984, The Cobra, George Takano. 1985, Steve Williams. 1986, Rick Steiner. 1987, Big Bubba Rogers, Big Boss Man. 1988, Sting. 1989, Lex Luger. 1990, Kenta Kobashi. Mark Madden, in an interview for the Observer Yearbook last year, Cactus Jack said he wanted to get to the point where he was considered a complete wrestler, and not a bump artist. Well, he's gained some weight along the way, but he's reached that point. Steve Gerber, Masao Orihara is still inconsistent and at times boring, but then he will perform a brilliant maneuver, especially his moonsault. Andy Stowell, Billy Black is really something. He was the best wrestler in the GWF and really puts on a show with All Japan, and he's only been working for 2 years. I hope one of the US offices gives him a chance. Teresa Demery, while he gets little credit, Virgil has improved tremendously this year and does a great over-the-top rope bump.
Evan Schlesinger. Okay, so Billy Black's moonsault out of the ring isn't as crisp as Masao Orihara's, but how many other wrestlers have ever even attempted to do that move?
Black is truly outstanding and has only been around for 2 years. He may be the best worker in the business in a few years. John Muse, a year ago, Kyoko Inoue was just another mid-level woman wrestler. Today she's one of the best wrestlers in the world. Michael McGowan, how much better can Kena Kobashi become? He's shown he can excel in either singles or tag team matches. He's a gifted technical wrestler and a potential superstar. D. Knickerbocker, Cactus Jack went from a mid-card wrestler who took incredible bumps to a main eventer who could have a match of the year style match with the right opponent. Bill Strong, Dustin Rhodes was the most improved wrestler in 1991, apparently from hanging around with Barry Windham. Chris Zavisa, Cactus Jack went from being a good brawler in the world's top 50 or 60 to breaking into the world's top 10. That improvement is unmatched by anyone else this year. Who else this year had a good match with Van Hammer? Most unimproved. 1. Davey Boy Smith, 69, 523. 2. Hulk Hogan, 58, 368. 3. Sid Justice, 32, 300. 4. Tatsumi Fujinami, 47, 299. 5. Greg Valentine, 13, 261. Honorable mention: Lex Luger, 238, Sting, 205, Jim Duggan, 193, Genichiro Tenryu, 185, Orville Mustafa, 162, Kerry Von Erich, 133, Jimmy Snuka, 104, El Gigante, 95, Hercules, 93, Undertaker, 89, Sergeant Slaughter, 87, Ric Flair, 85. Previous winners: 1984, Jimmy Snuka. 1985, Sergeant Slaughter. 1986, Bob Orton. 1987, Butch Reed. 1988, Bam Bam Bigelow. 1989, Jim Duggan. 1990, Sting. Tom Wisman. WCW as a whole declined more in 1991 than Western civilization ever could hope to. Mike Omonski. Sting is only a shadow of what he once was and continues to be a disappointment. Jeff Cohen. For a man who gets put into main events with regularity, Jim Duggan has no excuse for getting so much worse every year. Mystery Eye. Greg Valentine should win with no problem this year. I believe he's trying, but if I said he's a shell of his former self, then I'd be generous. Steve Sims. Tatsumi Fujinami, like his dropkick, just isn't what he used to be. John Karish. Tatsumi Fujinami's skills really deteriorated in 1991, and this was showcased even more by the fact that New Japan gave him an undeserved major push. Steve Yohei. Hulk Hogan has looked bad since his 1990 match with Stan Hansen in Japan. It's just not the steroids that he's missing, it's that he's lacking stamina and power. He really held Ric Flair back. Did anyone see his match with Yoshiaki Yatsu? He just quit working right in the middle of the match. Steve Gerber. The Undertaker has degenerated from a promising big man into a one-dimensional character, although in the WWF he's doing what is expected.
Joey CKL, Colonel Mustafa, the Iron Gut, wins by a mile.
Who can forget the classic moment at this year's Survivor Series where he took time out to load his boot, and then threw some punches? Mark Madden, Hulk Hogan couldn't even have great matches this year with Ric Flair.
John McAdam, in 1990, Mean Mark had some pretty good matches and showed a ton of wrestling potential.
Now an Undertaker match is almost a guaranteed dud.
This is the second issue of the current 4-issue set.
If you've got A1 on your current address label, it means that your Observer subscription will expire in 2 weeks. Renewal rates remain $6 for 4 issues, $12 for 8, $24 for 16, $36 for 24, $48 for 32 up through $60 for 40 issues within the United States and Canada. Rates for overseas airmail subscriptions are $9 for each set of 4 issues up through $90 for 40 issues. All subscription orders, letters to the editor, news items, results and reports on arena shows or any other correspondence should be sent to the Wrestling Observer newsletter, P.O. Box 1228, Campbell, California 950091228. Fax messages can be sent here at 408-378-6562 afternoon Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific Time, on a daily basis. EMLL. The January 17th show from Arena Coliseo in Mexico City saw Antifaz and La Mascara win 2 out of 3 falls from Halcón Negro and Septiembre Negro in 1618 via a third fall countout 1 1/2 star. La Mascara seems to have good potential and did a spectacular liger dive at the finish. Kung Fu and Espectro Jr. and Espectro de Ultra Tumba won 2 out of 3 falls from Platino and Super Astro and Mano Negra in 1639 1/2 star. Pretty much a terrible match. Kung Fu is so bad nowadays. Jerry Estrada and La Fiera and Bestia Salvaje won 2 straight falls from Huracan Sevilla and Blue Demon Jr. and Leo del Solitario in 1541 3 stars. Sevilla juice like crazy and they're building up a Sevilla vs Salvaje feud to end with a hair versus hair match. And Satanico and Fuerza Guerrera and Blue Panther won 2 out of 3 falls from Ultimate Dragon. Yoshihiro Asai and Canadian Vampire Casanova and Octagon in 1624 when Satanico pinned Dragon clean in the third fall 2 1/4 stars. Estrada and Pero Aguayo and Emilio Charles Jr. beat the juniors, Leo del Lismark, Eo del Solitario, and Leo del Santo in a bout which ended via DQ for a ref bump, but the ref was bumped so hard that he spent the night in the hospital. Conan, Pero Aguayo, and Rick Patterson had a 3-way hair versus hair match on December 29th in Monterrey, which ended with Patterson losing his hair. Conan was named Overall Wrestler of the Year for 1991 by Box E Lucha magazine in its fan poll, with Connect finishing second and CN Cars third. Winners for MLL awards in the balloting were Octagon as Best Technico Babyface, Vulcano and Tony Arce as Tag Team, Volador as Newcomer, Leo de Lismark as Best Rookie. It's actually too bad more readers haven't seen him because he was one of the overlooked guys in the Observer Awards balloting. Vampire as Best Foreigner. Attila Jr. and Destroyer and El Muerto will get a lower card push when the group returns to Arena Mexico on February 21st after they were a big hit in Guatemala. Coco were headed in during March. Pero Aguayo, who had been working back and forth with both major promotions, signed a full-time MLL contract on January 15th. This leaves Tinieblas Jr. and Sr. Mil Mascaras and Santo as the only big names who headline for both promotions. The 59th annual anniversary show, biggest card of the year, is set for September 18th with a US vs Mexico vs Japan theme. Gran Davis's 19-year-old son Oswaldo Patino debuts under the name Tor Ver this month. Promoter Paco Alonso is working on an exchange deal with the WWF, and the ones he's most interested in bringing in would be Mr. Perfect, The Rockers, and Randy Savage. WWF Primetime Wrestling started on Channel 4 in Mexico City 2 weeks ago. UWA. January 12th at El Torreo in Naucalpan saw El Signo retain the UWA Light Heavyweight title, winning 2 out of 3 falls from former partner El Texano. Even though Signo is a heel, this was a scientific match and said to be a good one. Canek and Chris Benoit and Buffalo Allen, Bad News Allen, won 2 out of 3 falls from Dos Caras and Enrique Vieira, and Villano 3 via DQ, and 3 gave Pegasus Kid a low blow in front of the ref after the ref missed Pegasus Kid, giving 3 a low blow. After the match, Allen beat up Vieira, who juiced, and Pegasus ripped up 3's mask to set up singles matches down the road. Fishman and Canadian Tiger, Mike Lazansky and Killer beat Silver King and Transformer and Gran Hamada in 2 out of 3 falls. Real Good, Rambo and Black Power and Negro Navarro beat Tamba and Villano 1 and Fantasma. Frey Tormenta and Valente Fernandez and Solar I beat Jose Luis Feliciano and Black Terry, and El Engendro and the opener saw Momotaro, Monkey Magic Wakita and Angel Mortal over Samurai Osamu Matsuda, and Ninja Sasuke Masa Michinoku. Los Villanos kept their UWA Trios titles on January 5 in Netzahualcoy, beating Lobo Rubio and Hijo del Diablo and Shu El Guerrero.
Signo kept the light heavyweight title on January 2 in Mexico City, beating Villano v.
Box y Lucha awards for this promotion were Dos Caras as Best Técnico, Babyface Negro Casas as Best Rudo, Hill, Connect and Fishman as Best Tag Team, Villanos as Best Trio, Villano 4 as Best Newcomer, Katana as Best Rookie. Although he's really Leon Chino, who has been wrestling for a number of years, and Chris Benoit as Best Foreigner, beating out both Jushin Liger and Owen Hart in that category. Xander Khan, a former double world champion, who has been out of action since April 1990 with an injury, returns to El Toreo on January 26. Bam Bam Bigelow will be in for 8 days starting on that show as well. Most of the major house shows this past week have been headlined by Benoit and Allen vs. Connect and Fishman. This past Sunday's main event at El Toreo is Benoit and Negro Casas vs. Hijo del Santo and Villano 3 to begin the build-up for Benoit's WWF Light Heavyweight title defense against Villano 3 at El Toreo in a few weeks. The January 5 Casas-Santos singles match went 45 minutes. Promoter Carlos Maines told the newspaper that he'll never book another Connect vs. Mil Mascaras match, because neither guy will do the favor for the other apparently. Fatu and Samoan Savage returned February 9 while Coquina returns on January 26. Foreigners in the new January ratings were Coquina as number 3 contender behind Connect in the heavyweights, Gigante Warrior, Butch Masters at number 4, Allen at number 5, Big Van Vader at number 6 and Fatu at number 10. Miguelito Perez is number 5 in junior heavyweights behind champ Enrique Vieira, while Samoan Savage is number 9, the only 280-pound junior heavyweight in wrestling. Benoit is number 4 in the light heavyweights behind champ Signo. Eddie Guerrero is number 7 in the middleweights behind champ Casas. Samoan's number 7 in tag teams, title vacant although Gran Hamada and Kendo have since won the straps. Gigante Warrior and Perez and Hurricane Castillo Jr. are number 3 in the trios behind Villanos. Although with Castillo jumping from WWC he won't be coming back. Coquina and Savage and Fatu are number 4, Guerreros are number 7 and Mercenaries are number 9.
All Japan. Next tour will be February 22 to March 6 with Terry Gordy. The first Budokan Hall show of 1992 will be March 4.
January 18 in Tota drew 3,400 as Jumbo Tsuruta and Akira Tao bet Kena Kobashi and Toshiaki Kawada in 22:39 when Tsuruta pinned Kobashi, Mitsuharu Misawa pinned Yoshinari Ogawa, Hansen and Joel Deaton and Billy Black beat Tommy Rogers and Bobby Fulton and Jackie Fulton, Ace pinned Tsuyoshi Kikuchi, Mark and Chris Youngblood beat Richard Slinger and Steve Armstrong and Giant Baba and Rusher Kimura and Mighty Inoue beat Haruka Aiganen and Motoshi Okuma and Masafuchi. January 17 in Iwaki drew 2,100 at Misawa and Kawada and Kobashi beat Black and Deaton and Hansen when Misawa pinned Black in 15-12, Tsuruta pinned Ace, Tao pinned Jackie Fulton, Baba and Kikuchi and Kimura beat Aigan and Okuma and Fuchi in 22-29. Bobby Fulton and Rogers beat Slinger and Ogawa. Youngbloods beat Osamu Teranishi and Mighty Inoue and Armstrong pinned Satoru Osako. January 13 in Himeji drew 2,100 as Misawa and Kawada beat Tsuruta and Fuchi in 22-55 when Kawada used the sleeper on Fuchi. Hansen and Ace beat Kobashi and Kikuchi. Tao pinned Black. Youngbloods beat Deaton and Armstrong. Slinger pinned Rogers and Teranishi and Inoue beat Bobby and Jackie Fulton. January 15 at Tokyo's Korakuen Hall taped for this past Sunday night's television show, before a sellout 2,100 saw Tsuruta and Tao beat Hansen and Deaton. Misawa pinned Ace with a Tiger Driver in 15-41, Kawada and Kikuchi beat Ogawa and Fuchi. Kobashi pinned Black, Youngbloods beat Bobby and Jackie Fulton, Rogers pinned Slinger and Inoue pinned Armstrong and Baba and Kimura beat Okuma and Aigan. On last weekend's television show, they talked about the record-setting 8.2 rating for the Dynamite Kid retirement show and noted that the rating actually peaked at 1 a.m. at 11.2. New Japan. Announced for the next tour from January 30 to February 12 will be Bam Bam Bigelow, Chris Benoit, Scott Norton, Tony St. Clair England, Tony Halme, Brad Armstrong Rambo who holds the CWA World title in Austria, and Steve Austin making his Japan debut. The January 4 Tokyo Dome card drew a whopping 11.0 VR rating and 14.7 true rating, which will almost assuredly make it the most watched pro wrestling television show of the year anywhere in the world. Lineups announced this week were January 30 in Tokyo with Riki Choshu and Hiroshi Hazi vs. Tatsumi Fujinami and Akira Nagami, Orton and Shinya Hashimoto vs. Bigelow and Kim Duke, Halme vs. Rambo and Keiji Muto and Masa Chono vs. St. Clair and Austin. Television taping on February 4 has Choshu and Hashimoto and Muto vs. Norton and Rambo and Bigelow, Hazi and Koshinaka vs. Chono and Nagami, Halme vs. Duke. TV taping on February 8 from Sapporo has Choshu and Chono vs Bigelow and Rambo, Muto and Hazi vs Fujinami and Koshinaka. The double title match with Norio Oniga defending the IWGP Junior Heavyweight title against the WCW Light Heavyweight title held by Jushin Liger, Halme vs Norton and Hashimoto and Nagami vs Austin and Benoit. February 10 TV taping from Nagoya has Muto and Hazi defending the IWGP Tag Team title against Armstrong and Austin, Oniga vs Benoit for the junior title, which will probably wind up being Liger vs Benoit since Liger should win the title on February 8, and Choshu and Fujinami and Kengo Kimura vs Chono and Hashimoto and Nagami. Tour ends February 12 in Osaka with Muto and Hazi vs Chono and Choshu, Fujinami and Hashimoto vs Bigelow and Halme, Norton vs Rambo and Liger and Nagami vs Benoit and Oniga. The latest issue of the magazine Muscle Mag International has a mention of 325-pound pro wrestler Tony Halme in the original Gold's Gym in Southern California as doing the stack of 405 pounds for 10 reps on front pull-downs, and saying he's one of the strongest guys in the gym. FMW. The latest tour ended on January 15 in Kobe before a sellout 3,118 as the Big Titan from Calgary captured the WWA World Martial Arts title from Atsushi Onita in 9:39 when the Sheik interfered with a knife and knifed Onita in the stomach to set up the pin. Also on the show, Sheik and the Gladiator lost to Samba Asako and Tarzan Goto, Jim Peterson and Horace Boulder beat the Shooter and Ricky Fuji, Kevin Sullivan beat Mr. Ganasuke and Mark Starr beat Yukihide Ueno. January 14 in Ueno before a sellout 2,284 saw Onita and Goto and Osako beat Boulder and Gladiator and Titan in a street fight, but after the match Sheik again attacked Onita with a knife. Sheik and Sullivan beat Shooter and Fuji, Peterson beat Ganasuke and Starr pinned Eiji Ezeki. January 13 in Nagahara drew a sellout 2,543 as Onita and Goto and Shooter won a street fight from Peterson and Boulder and Titan. Sheik and Sullivan beat Osako and Fuji, Gladiator beat Ganasuke, and Starr pinned Ueno. Ueno is going to Baja California in February. Next tour is January 30th to February 11th with Mark Starr, Big Titan, Kevin Sullivan, Sabu, the Star Rider, from Florida, and lady wrestler AJ Watson from Florida. Other Japanese notes. PWF ran a show January 15th at the Yokohama Bunka Gym drawing 4,120 capacity 6,000. To see Masakatsu Funaki go to a 30-minute draw with Wayne Shamrock, Vince Torelli, Yoshiaki Fujiwara made Bart Vale submit to an Achilles heel hold. Minoru Suzuki beat Tamatake, Naoki Sano, SWS, beat Jerry Flynn and Takahashi beat Wellington Wilkins Jr. Universal opened its tour on January 17 at Tokyo's Korakuen Hall before a subcapacity crowd of 1,800 as Pantera 2 and Punish and Crush beat Tony Arce and Vulcano and Canelo Casas. Robin Hood and Los Brazos. Robin Hood is actually another brother of Los Brazos. Beat Gan Tetsu and Kendo and Gran Hamada and Dos Cars, who they are trying to push as the top draw with Yoshihiro Asai working with SWS. Jerry Lynn went to a 15-minute draw with Lightning Kid and Lady Apache, and Koro Maeda beat Mima Shimoda and Mariko Yoshida from All Japan Women. January 19 at Korakuen Hall drew just 1,500 for a triple championship show as Hamada and Kendo captured the vacant UWA World Tag Team titles. Hamada and Pero Aguayo were the champs, but Aguayo jumped from UWA to MLL, beating Brazo de Oro and Brazo de Plata. Manami Toyota and Toshio Yamada from All Japan Women captured the vacant UWA World Tag Team titles, beating Lady Apache and Koro Maeda. Punish and Crush retained the UWA Intercontinental Tag Team titles, beating Villanos 4 and 5 plus Dos Caras, and El Texano and Silver King beat Dr. Wagner Jr. and Lynn and Lightning Kid. Bruce Kreitzman from Minnesota is in as an American referee. They also had a tournament to decide the Universal Middleweight title on the card with Casas, Vulcano Arce and Pantera 2, but I'm not sure who won that match. They have 22-man Battle Royals headlining shows on January 21st and January 22nd, and on January 23rd Lynn defends the GWF Light Heavyweight title against Lightning Kid. All Japan Women on January 18th in Ibaraki drew 1,350 as Debbie Malenko and Kyoko Inoue and Yamada beat Asia Kong and Miori Kamiya and Koro Ito. Toyota beat Seiki Hasegawa and Bull Nakano, and Akira Hokuto beat Yumiko Hata and Suzuka Minami. JWP finishing up its final tour before it goes out of business drew 1,132 on January 18th in Hiroshima as Pink Cadillac and Cutie Suzuki beat Three Girls and Handicap Match, and Harley Saito and Devil Masami beat Eagle Sawai and Dynamite Kansai. Kato Kung Lee, Blue Panther and Emilio Charles Jr. are coming to SWS in February. Wing has a tour from February 9th to February 16th. February 9th at Korakuen Hall has a bunkhouse tag team match with Mr. Pogo and Miguelito Perez versus Gypsy Joe and Iceman, Ricky Santana plus Mitsudaru Tokuda versus Dick Murdoch. February 11th has Pogo vs. Murdoch, and February 16th at Korakuen Hall ends the tour with Perez vs. Iceman for the Caribbean title and Murdoch vs. the original TNT, Perry Jackson. Weekly Pro Wrestling's 1991 Fan Awards saw Misawa win Wrestler of the Year over, in order, Tsuruta, Fujinami, Onita, Kawada, Chono, Choshu, Akira Maeda, Muto, and Bull Nakano. For Most Improved, Kawada won, followed by Kobashi, Chono, Oniga, Kyoko Inoue, Kiyoshi Tamura, Funaki, Asai, Tao, and Kikuchi. Men's Singles Match of the Year was Tsuruta vs. Misawa on April 18th at Budokan Hall, followed by Muto vs. Chono, August 11th, Misawa vs. Gordy, June 1st, Tsuruta vs. Kawada, October 24th, Onita vs. Goto, September 23rd, Ensign vs. Kobashi, September 4th, Liger vs. Oniga, April 30th.
FLAIR vs. Fujinami, March 21st, Onita vs. Pogo, May 6th, and Vader vs. Norton, June 12th.
Best Women's Singles Match was Nakano vs. Kyoko Inoue, September 7th, followed by Megumi Kudo vs. Combat Toyota, March 28th, Nakano vs. Akira Hokuto, January 4th, Bison Kimura vs. Kyoko Inoue, August 18th. Nakano vs. Monster Ripper, April 29th, Scorpion, Reiko Hoshino vs. Cutie Suzuki, October 10th, Kudo vs. Reggie Bennett, June 30th, Toyota vs. Miwa Sato, October 14th, Hokuto vs. Minami, April 29th, and Kudo vs. Terechikova, September 23rd. Men's Tag Team Match of the Year was Misawa and Kawada vs. Tsuruta and Tao, September 4th, followed by Misawa and Kawada and Kobashi vs. Tsuruta and Tao and Fuchi, 51-minute match from April 20th, Steiners vs. Hazi and Sasaki, March 21st, Steiners vs. Hazi and Sasaki, May 31st, Misawa and Kawada vs. Gordy and Williams, May 24th, Muto and Hazi vs. Rick Steiner and Norton, November 5th, Gordy and Williams vs. Hansen and Spivey, April 18th, Gordy and Williams vs. Misawa and Kawada, December 6th, Muto and Chono vs. Hazi and Sasaki, July 4th, and Tsuruta and Tao vs. Misawa and Kawada, November 29th. Best Women's Tag Match was Asia Kong and Bison Kimura vs. Bull Nakano and Monster Ripper at WrestleMarine Piat on November 21st in the cage, followed by Kong and Kimura vs. Nakano and Kyoko Inoue, January 11th hair match, Kong and Kimura vs. Inoue and Yamada, December 8th, Toyota and Hokuto vs. Yamada and Inoue, November 21st, Kong and Kimura vs. Nakano and Hokuto, June 18th, Esther Moreno and Mariko Yoshida vs. Debbie Malenko and Kyoko Inoue, May 26th, Kong and Kimura vs. Toyota and Moreno, April 29th, Nakano and Hokuto vs. Yamada and Inoue, November 28th, Nakano and Hokuto vs. Malenko and Toyota, October 26th,
and Nakano and Bat Yoshinaga vs. Hokuto and Hasegawa, May 26th.
Most popular foreign wrestler was Scott Norton, followed by Hansen, Dynamite Kid, Vader, Gordy, Scott Steiner, Shamrock, Gregory Verichev, Dirk Leon Frey and Rick Steiner. Interesting to note the absence of all mention of any SWS or WWF wrestlers in this poll. I'm not sure if it's because Weekly Pro is banned by SWS so they aren't listing their wrestlers, or that SWS wrestlers have no real fan following, since their audience is made up of freebies in most cities of people who go to eyeglass stores, and didn't get any votes. Japanese TV Rundown. December 21st, New Japan, 1. Liger and Nagami beat Negro Casas and Katana in 1348 when Nagami pinned Katana with a dragon suplex. It was good with Liger in since he can work lucha style, but Nagami had problems working with the Mexicans. But Liger worked some hot high-flying spots. 3 stars, 2. Muto and Hazi beat Norton and Brad Rheingans in 1226 when Muto pinned Rheingans with a moonsault.
Norton played Superman, destroying the Japanese guys.
It turned into a good match at the end, particularly with Muto going wild. 3¼ stars, 3.
Choshu and Fujinami and Chono beat Bigelow and Tim Horner and Kim Duke in 10:59 when Chono made Horner submit to the STF.
Bigelow's knee wasn't 100%, but he still worked well, and this was a good match. 3 stars. December 22nd, All Japan, 1. Williams pinned Kikuchi with a stampede. The match wasn't bad, but the huge size difference was too much for both men to overcome and sell to make it competitive, so Williams dominated too easily. 2¼ stars, 2.
Gordy pinned Kobashi with a power bomb.
Lots of great spots, including Kobashi doing a DDT on the floor after picking the mats up. Kobashi did all his hot moves for near falls before losing. 3¾ stars, 3.
Dynamite Kid and Johnny Smith beat Johnny Ace and Sunny Beach in Dynamite's last match.
Ace looked good, but the entire match was only there for Kid to do his patented spots for the last time. Kid pinned Beach with the flying headbutt. 2¼ stars. December 28th, New Japan, 1. Hame pinned Bigelow with a flying clothesline in 10 minutes. Bigelow carried the match.
Hale isn't terrible, but he's nowhere near ready for what they want to do with him.
Still, I was surprised as how good it was considering Halme's inexperience. 2 1/4 stars, 2. Fujinami and Chono beat Choshu and Nagami in 15:32.
Lots of heat here.
Nagami is going to be one of the big stars of 1992 because he's really improved. He ended up doing the job to Fujinami's powerbomb, but not before being the highlight of the match. 4 stars. Muto and Hazi kept the IWGP Tag Team titles, beating Hashimoto and Norton in 1949.
Norton did a spot where he reversed a double suplex and suplexed both men simultaneously.
Really hot early, but slowed in the middle and picked up again at the finish. Muto pinned Hashimoto with a moonsault. 3 3/4 stars. January 5th, All Japan, 1. Hansen and Ace beat Kawada and Kikuchi when Ace pinned Kikuchi with a new finisher where he puts his leg on the guy's neck and smashes his face into the ground.
Ace is going to have a tough time getting over as Hansen's regular partner in the top feuds.
Kikuchi took a lot of stiff shots from both men. 3 stars, 2. Misawa and Kobashi beat Tsuruta and Fuchi. Super opening exchange between Kobashi and Fuchi.
Slowed from there but picked up and down throughout until it was their typically heated super main event match.
Kobashi pinned Fuchi with a rolling cradle after the 20-minute mark. 3 3/4 stars, 3. Tao won a battle royal, pinning Joel Deaton in the finals. All Japan does a lot of things right, but battle royals aren't one of them. 1/2 star. Oregon. The January 18th card in Portland drew 300 fans as Steve Dahl and the Grappler won the main event, beating Colonel De Beers and John Rambo when both De Beers and Dahl were KO'd and the ref was down, and then Brickhouse Brown came out and put Dahl on top for the pin.
After the match, Brown traded heavy racial slurs back and forth with De Beers and Rambo to set up next week's singles match against Rambo. Ron Harris captured the Northwest title, beating Demolition Crush in a 2 of 3 fall match. The wrestlers went to the dressing room between falls, and apparently Don Harris came out for the third fall and used a foreign object to pin Crush, masquerading as brother Ron, who worked the first 2 falls of the match. After the match, Crush issued a challenge for next week, saying he wanted a handicap match against both Harris brothers, and if he can't win in less than 15 minutes, he'll give them $1,000, but if he does win, he gets the Northwest title belt back. In other results, Mike Miller pinned Brown due to distraction from De Beers, Mike Winner beat Al Madrill via DQ, and Jesse Barr beat Don Harris via DQ. TV negotiations with Channel 49 are still up in the air, which is probably going to spell ultimately either the doom or survival of the promotion. USWA. The biggest thing from here is one of those tape collectors must-gets, which took place on January 17th in Kennett, Missouri and aired Saturday on WMC TV in Memphis. It started as a tag team match with the Moondogs versus Jeff Jarrett and Robert Fuller. Fuller ended up being taken out of action when manager Richard Lee busted a garbage can over his head. Jerry Lawler made the save, and he and Jarrett brawled with the Moondogs all over the building and into the concession stands with mustard, broken glass, Jarrett's shoulder bled real bad, brooms, broken Coke bottles, broken tables, etc. This was reminiscent of the famous concession stand brawl of the late 1970s with Lawler and Bill Dundee against Wayne Ferris, Honky Tonk Man and Larry Latham, now one of the Moondogs, and the early 1980s with Atsushi Onita and Masafuchi versus Ricky Morton and Eddie Gilbert. Koko Ware seems to be turning subtle heel as he used heel tactics to beat Tony Anthony in a match where the winner got a shot at USWA champ Kimala last week. However, Ware will obviously be the face in that match. Moondogs and Jarrett and Lawler traded whipping each other with belts on a television brawl as well. Dennis Corluzzo, WWA promoter in New Jersey, did a few interviews as Kimala's financial advisor and claimed that Jerry Lawler had 2 illegitimate kids living in New Jersey that he never sends child support to, and brought out Fred the Elephant Boy, that some of you may know from the Howard Stern show, as one of Jerry's kids. Corluzzo also claimed to be the executor of Andy Kaufman's will and blamed Lawler for Kaufman's death. Brian Lawler, whose heel turn has been the highlight of recent television, wasn't mentioned at all this week, nor is he on the show for Monday, so perhaps he's history. The January 20th card had Anthony versus Doug Masters, Tom Pritchard and Miss Texas versus Tony Falk and CJ in a street fight, Eric Embry versus Bart Sawyer for the Southern title, Anthony and Pritchard in Texas, and Sawyer versus Masters and Falk and CJ and Embry in a strap battle royal, Fuller versus Richard Lee, Kimala versus Ware for the USWA title, and Lawler and Jarrett versus Moondogs. Global. January 17th at the Dallas Sportatorium drew 535 fans. Last week's television was preempted locally, as, for ESPN air date February 10th, Chaz Taylor pinned Stephen Dane, Bull Payne beat Tug Taylor via DQ, and Baby Doll attacked Samantha. Scott Putski pinned Barry Horowitz, and Eddie Gilbert's TV title match with Terry Garvin ended with the title belt held up.
Gilbert used a back suplex on Garvin, but both men had their shoulders down and each got a shoulder up, but with two refs. One raised Gilbert's hand and the other raised Garvin's hand, and after a post-match argument they held the belt up. ESPN air date February 12, Ben Jordan and Bill Irwin beat Gilbert and Horowitz via DQ when Horowitz hit the ref. Black Bart pinned Tony George, Dark Patriot Doug Gilbert pinned Gary Young after a loaded headbutt, and Rod Price and John Tatum beat Chaz and Tug Taylor. ESPN air date February 17, Terry Garvin and Putski beat Tatum and Price via DQ due to interference from Skander Akbar. Dane pinned Jordan, Bart double countout with Irwin, and Payne beat Sam Houston in a second throws in the towel match. Payne came out without Samantha, who he said was injured earlier by Baby Doll. Gilbert, doing color commentary, had a meeting and they decided that Horowitz would be Payne's second. Horowitz did a lot of comedy as he drank a Coke and ate popcorn and paid no attention to the match. Finish saw Samantha came out and knocked down Baby Doll, and her towel went in the ring. January 24th as Garvin vs. Billy Joe Travis, Irwin vs. Tom Davis, Jerry Lynn vs. Mike Davis, Chaz Taylor vs. Payne, Houston vs. Bart. Remember the Mid-Atlantic title feud from around 1986, Horowitz vs. Putski. If Putski wins, he gets $1,000 from Eddie Gilbert. Tom and Mike Davis vs. Chaz and Tug Taylor, with the winning team getting a shot at Tatum and Price's GWF Tag Team title. Dark Patriot vs. Gary Young, Bart vs. Irwin in a match that must end via knockout. Gilbert vs. Garvin with 3 judges, Joe Pedicino, Boney Blackstone and Max Andrews, to determine the TV champ, and Bull Payne and Samantha vs. Houston and Baby Doll in a mixed match. Eddie Gilbert's fireball throw at Terry Garvin was edited off the ESPN show because of ESPN standards. Eddie Gilbert did an interview saying he's the one man that Cactus Jack is afraid of, and said he's the man who retired Bill Watts, which some would joke he did, since Eddie was the booker when Watts sold the territory to Crockett. Chris Love is history once again. Here and there. Dennis Corluzzo and Larry Sharp's card on January 11 in Clementon, New Jersey drew 650 as Bob Backlund pinned Dick Murdoch, Jerry Lawler DDQ Kimala, Spider beat Joe Daniels via DQ to keep the WWA title, and Chris Candido drew Chris Evans. Spider, Glenn Ruth, is headed to Puerto Rico. Sharp will be holding Monster Factory tryouts on February 8 at the Tampa Sportatorium at 1 p.m. LPWA has canceled all future television tapings but still claim to have a pay-per-view show set on February 23 from Dallas. Iqua on January 16 in Tampa before 200 fans saw Coconut Man beat Tex Salinger via DQ. Robbie Van Dam and Lou Perez won a non-title match from the Terminators, and Pat Tanaka and Jimmy Backlund beat Kendall Windham, who is out on work release, and Alan Iron Eagle via countout when Kevin Sullivan interfered and brawled all over the building. This group starts television on Channel 38 in Tampa on March 7 at 10 a.m. Among those coming in for the group this week are Junkyard Dog, Dean Malenko, Lenny Poffo, and Mark Starr. CWA on January 19 in Tampa before 200 saw Iron Eagle pin Salinger, Flynn beat Van Dam, and Black Panther beat Tommy Starr. Steve Gator Wolf has 10 shows booked in early March in Arizona with Abdullah Hussein, Lou Fabiano, Billy Anderson and Louis Spicoli. Wynn has a cystic fibrosis benefit show on February 7 in Martins North Point off the Baltimore Beltway with Honky Tonk Man vs. Nikolai Volkov and Scott Anthony vs. Tom Brandy, which is the group run by Ed Zone's debut show. Former wrestler Count Antonio Verdi, offered to Benedetti, who wrestled as the Madman from Milan, Italy, died on January 8 at the age of 81. He wrestled mainly in the 50s around Buffalo. Carol Lindsay, who is the original money backer for GWF, is running shows under the GWF name on February 16 at the Atlanta International Ballroom with Patriot, Del Wilkes, vs. Rip Morgan, Hector Guerrero vs. Fabuloso Blondie, Ken Timms, Scott Anthony vs. Jeff Gaylord, Barry Horowitz vs. Night Stalker, and Bambi vs. Peggy Lee Leather, all on February 22 in Gadsden, Alabama with Patriot vs. Morgan, Bob Armstrong vs. Death Row, Scott Armstrong vs. The Nightmare, Ted Allen, Jacko Victory vs. Jeff Gaylord, and Honest Abe Lincoln, who looks exactly like Abe Lincoln, which may make no sense to those of you in foreign countries but probably makes perfect sense in this country, versus Alabama Inmate. WWF. TV tapings are January 27 in Lubbock and January 28 in Amarillo, and the February 8 Fox special will be taped in one of those buildings, but not sure what matches will be taped. Best guess, just because these are the 2 headline matches in both buildings, for the 1-hour special will be either Hulk Hogan and Sid Justice vs. Ric Flair and Undertaker plus Roddy Piper vs. the Mountie for the Intercontinental title, or Hogan and Randy Savage vs. Jake Roberts and Undertaker and Flair vs. Piper. Sid Justice. It was supposed to be the beginning of the heel turn, even if nobody got it, still booked as a babyface for the short-term future. Most of the house shows before WrestleMania will be headlined by either Savage vs. Roberts cage matches with Justice vs. Undertaker as support, Flair and Undertaker vs. Hogan and Piper tag matches. On the shows Hogan works, or Flair vs. Piper cage matches, probably with no titles at stake. Lex Luger has pretty well been confirmed as joining the WBF by several sources. Apparently they'll be running an angle with Luger entering a bodybuilding contest and will get blown away by the big bodybuilding names, lose his temper and somehow segue that into becoming a wrestler. Using Luger is as much an attempt to get wrestling fans interested in bodybuilding as anything else. Elizabeth won't be going on the road anymore because she's tired of the traveling. January 18th in Boston drew a legit sellout 15,000 fans, which is the first sellout of a big building for a non-pay-per-view card from either group in so many months that I've lost track for the first Hogan vs. Flair match in Boston. Results saw Repo Man beat Virgil using the ropes 1 1/4 stars, New Foundation beat Warlord and Barbarian when Hart pinned Barbarian 1 1/4 stars, Ted DiBiase drew Tito Santana and 17:37 3 stars, Hogan beat Flair via countout in 13:45 3 1/4 stars. British Bulldog pinned Berserker 1 star, Chris Walker pinned Kato 1 star and Legion of Doom and Roddy Piper beat Mountie and Natural Disasters 2 1/4 stars. Expect a Repo Man vs. Boss Man program. January 18th in Toledo drew 3,500 as Kerry Von Erich pinned Hercules 1 1/2 star, Boss Man pinned IRS 2 1/4 stars, Tatanka, Chris Chavez, pinned Brooklyn Brawler 1 1/2 star, Undertaker beat Sid Justice via DQ 1 1/4 stars, Jim Duggan pinned Jerry Sags 2 stars and Randy Savage pinned Jake Roberts 1 star. January 9th in Sarasota, Florida drew 2,500 as Walker pinned Brawler, Slaughter beat Mustafa, Repo Man pinned Virgil, Hart beat Flair via DQ in 20 minutes when Hart had the sharpshooter on and Flair poked the ref in the eyes, slow-paced early but built into a good match. DiBiase beat Santana, Mountie pinned Greg Valentine and Legion of Doom beat Natural Disasters. January 17th in Springfield, Massachusetts drew 4,500 as Tatanka pinned Skinner 1/4 star, Repo Man pinned Virgil 2 stars, Slaughter pinned Sags 1/2 star, Bulldog pinned Kato Dud, Flair beat Piper via countout in 7:23 1/2 stars, Mountie pinned Hart to win the IC title when both guys had their shoulders down but Mountie raised his just before the 3. Mountie hit Hart with the IC title belt before Piper made the save. There was a camera shooting this match so it may end on future telecasts. 2 1/2 stars and Hogan pinned Roberts in 6:31 1/2 star. Hogan subbed for Savage. Kevin Von Erich is supposed to be working the next TV tapings. Ratings from last week saw Primetime do a 2.6 and All-American a 2.2, neither of which is anything special given the time of year. WCW. Expect 3 new names in the spring, 2 of which are supposedly WWF stars and will probably be announced this week. Bookings are done through the end of March with no major changes. The Barry Windham heel turn has been postponed indefinitely, which is smart since it was way too soon. Brad Armstrong is wrestling as himself instead of Arachnaman because that nasty legal letter from Marvel Comics showed up. Big Josh and Ron Simmons won the U.S. Tag Team titles from the Young Pistols on January 14th in Columbus, Georgia. One of the biggest reasons, maybe even the biggest, for Jim Hart being dumped was that he was cited for too many communication breakdowns in the company, and because he wasn't a people person. January 16th in Jacksonville drew $3,052 and $26,200 as Richard Morton pinned Johnny B. Bad 1/4 star, Marcus Alexander Bagwell pinned Mike Thor Dud, Big Van Vader double countout with El Gigante 1 star, Arnold Anderson and Bobby Eaton won the tag belts from Dustin Rhodes and Ricky Steamboat in a 3-fall match which went 27-17. First fall saw Rhodes DQ'd, second fall saw Rhodes pin Eaton and third fall saw Anderson hit Rhodes with Paulie Dangerously's phone to get the pin after both Larry Zbyszko and Barry Windham had interfered and brawled to the back of the building. Brian Pillman pinned Tracy Smothers 2 stars, Steiners beat Mr. Hughes and Abdullah the Butcher when Hughes did the job 2 stars. It was scheduled as Steiners vs. Zbyszko and Austin, and Rude beat Sting via DQ with the famed Dusty finish, ref bump, face throws heel over top rope, face pins heel, second ref comes in and reverses decision so heel keeps the title, 3 1/2 stars. Austin was out until the clash with his bad knee. Rick Steiner arrived late because he was stopped at the Atlanta airport for carrying a gun which he forgot to take out of his bag. WCW has a date in Boston and Worcester, Massachusetts in March. Also on March 7th in Oakland at the Kaiser Convention Center with Sting vs. Rude in a cage match, Windham vs. Zbyszko in a death match and Steiners vs. Anderson and Eaton. No dates on Scott Norton at least until April, but some talk of teaming him with Vader and doing a program with Steiners later this year.
WCW on January 11th did a 3.0 rating for that hot show with the six-man tag match in Pillman and Zenk vs. Abdullah and Cactus, while Main Event on January 12th did a 2.2 and Power Hour did a 1.8.
Morale and enthusiasm within the organization is the highest it's been in a long time. January 17th in New Orleans drew 1,700 as Morton pinned Bad Pillman pinned Smothers, Hughes pinned Bagwell, later double countout with Gigante, Steiners beat Abdullah and Zabishko, Simmons beat Cactus Jack when Abdullah interfered, Rhodes and Steamboat beat Eaton and Anderson in a non-title match when Wyndham interfered and pushed Eaton off the top rope, and Rude beat Sting via DQ when Sting used the phone.
Basically the same results the rest of the weekend as well, drawing 1,500 on January 18th in Houston, 2,500 on January 19th in Oklahoma City, and 2,100 in January 20th in St. Joseph.
The readers' pages. John Arezzi of the Pro Wrestling Spotlight radio show at 99 Middle Country Road, Coram, New York 11727 is offering a package deal where he'll send a tape of his radio show with the interview with Billy Graham and David Schultz along with the first issue of his newsletter for $12. Kelly Crow of 6947 Coal Creek Parkway SE number 164, Renton, Washington 98059 has a list of wrestling videotapes plus is looking for a tape of Game 7 of the 1991 World Series and Game 3 of the 1982 Smythe Division playoff game, Los Angeles vs. Edmonton. Mark Rodmacher of 137 SE 72nd Avenue, Portland, Oregon 97215 is interested in obtaining tape lists from anyone who wants to trade for his best of Portland wrestling tapes. 1978-91.
David Prozik of 2278 Hidden Creek CTE, Lisle, Illinois 60532 has a 1991 yearbook which is 30 pages for sale for $2. Danny Bagliore of 1405 Avenue Z number 178, Brooklyn, New York 11235 is looking for videos of the cards at Madison Square Garden.
Triple L Productions of P.O. Box 317, Lambertville, Michigan 48144 has for sale a video called Scott Steiner His Early Years with rookie footage of Scott Steiner in Indiana.
Stephen Davis of 30 Regina Street, Springvale South, Melbourne, Victoria 3172 Australia is looking for the 1985 night grand final between Hawthorn and Essendon.
Jimmy Marshall of P.O. Box 249 Cochrane, Georgia 31014 is looking for back issues of the Wrestling Observer newsletter. Dwayne Long of 15,087 80th Dr. N, Palm Beach Gardens, Florida 33418 is looking for the August 91 television special hosted by Bill Bixby about Elvis being alive.
Mike Rogers of 2740 SE Llewellyn, Troutdale, Oregon 97060 is interested in 8x10 publicity photos of former West Coast stars.
He also sells a very good monthly newsletter called Ring Around the Northwest for 50 cents per copy. Jason Shepard of 1110 Vine Street, Wisconsin Dells, Wisconsin 53965 is looking for a tape of the January 3rd Inside Edition piece, a tape of any Hulk Hogan vs. Ric Flair match, the 2020 episode on Pro Wrestling from 1985 and any WWF television tapes from 1983-1990. Greg Anderson of 71B Vase Drive, Kelso, Washington 98626 is interested in getting the Uncle Milt's Pizza shows on Vancouver, Washington cable and can trade current tapes of All Japan and New Japan in exchange. Jeff Goldberg of 11628 Tanager Drive, Jacksonville, Florida 32225 is looking to trade his wrestling tapes going back to 1983 with someone in England who can tape British sitcoms for him. Rob Britt of 1411 E Post Oak Drive, Clarkston, Georgia 30021 is looking for a tape of Halloween, Havoc 91. John Zatter Jr. of 71 St. Mary's PL, Nutley, New Jersey 07110 is looking for tapes of Madison Square Garden house shows from 1980-84 and American Wrestling Alliance tapes from 1984-85. Ricky Short of P.O. Box 931, Brookneal, Virginia 24528 is looking for someone who can regularly supply him with tapes of WCW Pro Wrestling. Harry White of 1075 McCausland, St. Louis, Missouri 63117 is selling mid-condition St. Louis programs from the early 1980s, and includes the payoff sheets from the cards with the program. Rob Feinstein of 865 Green Ridge Circle, Langhorne, Pennsylvania 19053 has 400-plus tapes for trade. Bruce Genevin of 405 Deep Run Parkway, Elkridge, Maryland 21227 has videos for trade. Jerry Gray of 6315 Jennings Road, Orlando, Florida 32818 has wrestling robes and SWF videotapes for sale. Aaron Goff of 3049 Pillsbury Avenue, Minneapolis, Minnesota 55409 is looking for 1991 Japanese tapes and would like copies of the Wrestling Observer Yearbook pre-1988. Gary Cronin of 7761 Notley Road, Pasadena, Maryland 21122 is looking to buy or trade for wrestling photos and is looking for a regular supplier of all Japan women tapes of UWA Mexican tapes. Superstar Graham interview. The interview with Billy Graham was excellent. It was by far the most interesting interview with a wrestler that I've ever read. Now I can better understand why he's speaking out against steroid use in wrestling. Before I thought he was just out for a quick buck, but that's really not the case. It's really sad that he still has the urge to use steroids despite the pain and suffering he's had to endure. This proves to me just how addictive steroids can be. All we can do right now is sit back and wait to see what happens. How will Titan Sports and Hulk Hogan respond to all of this? I truly hope they admit the truth for a change. Hulk Hogan must admit his steroid use to the world. It's very difficult for me to write this letter because I'm one of the people who has chosen to look the other way on this subject for a long time now. As a grade school teacher, I take my job very seriously and know I have to be a role model to the children. Hulk Hogan didn't ask to be a role model, but he is being marketed as an all-American hero, so it's high time he acts like a hero and tells the truth, and hope that his Hulkamaniacs and their parents forgive all his previous lies. I believe that all pro wrestling merchandise should be taken off the shelves immediately, and Vince McMahon should commit himself to cleaning up pro wrestling for only the right reasons. The mainstream media needs to follow up on this story so Vince McMahon feels a lot of heat and is forced to make real changes. I believe Vince McMahon has the promotional ability to change pro wrestling in this country. But he has to do it soon before the news shows and talk shows ruin his empire. If Hogan won't admit the truth, he must not be rewarded for it. He must not be allowed to regain the WWF title, and he should put over someone who isn't artificially bulked up at WrestleMania. I realize all WWF pay-per-view shows have to end with a happy ending, but Vince McMahon and his creative team can certainly come up with something so that the fans are cheering after Hogan does the job. In any event, the time for a change is now. Federico Garcia Jr., Hawthorne, California. I think the Inside Edition piece on Hulk Hogan was much too slanted as portraying him out to be a steroid abuser regardless if he is. I believe a more tastefully done piece, like the one in the Observer, would be more applicable. Granted, Hogan might have used physique-enhancing drugs, but he also devotes time away from the ring helping others in need as well as being a devoted husband and father. I believe Billy Graham has real personality and warmth from his interview in The Observer. He is very articulate and seems to be no nonsense. Much thanks to him for his willingness to share his feelings with the readers and to The Observer for providing it to us. Brian Head, San Jose, California. This is the first time I've ever written a letter, but after reading the superstar Billy Graham interview in the January 10th issue, I had to write and tell you what an impact it had on me. I'm 27 years old and heavily into bodybuilding. I've been working out for 8 years and have never touched steroids. After seeing and reading about Wayne Coleman, I'm very glad of that fact. I hope this in-depth interview sheds a lot of light onto both the abusers and non-abusers, and we can get wrestling to how it should be. Never let anyone stop you from writing the truth about this subject. Stuart Kaplan, North Weymouth, Massachusetts. After reading the interview with Billy Graham, I could only ask myself one question: why? Why do the sauce? Scar tissue the size of tennis balls? My God, isn't that enough to scare the hell out of anyone? The shocking truth that Graham discussed about his ongoing steroid use had me cringing while reading. What are all these guys doing to themselves? Today's wrestlers must learn from the tragic experience of Graham. They'd better wake up and realize that Graham's current condition is their future if they continue to riddle their bodies with steroids. I applaud Billy Graham for his honesty in this interview. If he convinces one person to quit the juice or not start taking the juice because of his experience, then he will have done a great service, and will have made somebody's life, in the long run, a lot better. Gabriel Daigle, Buena Park, California. DM, why do the sauce? Because one wants to make a good living for himself and his family, and while it isn't the be-all and end-all, in a competitive business one tries to take whatever competitive edge one can. Also because many of today's wrestlers got in the business in the first place because of how they looked. They were already bodybuilders at heart, and there's no way to maintain the physique on a hard travel schedule without drugs, and it's exceedingly important to them personally as much as for business how they look. The scar tissue the size of a tennis ball is a rarity limited to the heavy users of injectables, by the way. Put yourself in Hogan's shoes at the age of 24. A tall rock musician, no college degree, wants to be a wrestler, and his hero in the ring is Billy Graham. Billy Graham was probably making $100,000 per year at the time, which in 1977 must have seemed like a ton of money for a nightclub musician. He's told by the local promoter to gain some weight to get into the business. Now let's look at 1992. A young guy hears that Hulk Hogan makes millions per year, and how do you think he's going to go about trying to be like Hulk Hogan? Do you still have to ask why do the sauce? After reading the interview with superstar Billy Graham, I was saddened. The saddest part is that nothing is going to change in this business until the promoters change it. To do that, it means they'd have to change their attitude about the boys, and that may never happen. Let's face it, promoters, with almost no exceptions, care about only one thing: their money. End of story. Until that changes, if the promoter can get rich, he won't care about the superstar Grahams, Savannah Jackson, Ed Gantners, who are destroyed along the way. It is way past time for someone to deliver a message to wrestling promoters everywhere. No more steroids. Bob Ivy. Starkville, Mississippi.